Yes, the answer is yes. I just finished Resident Evil 9 a couple hours ago, and while the game is still fresh in my mind after completion, I decided to make this video to answer the question, is Resident Evil 9 a good game? And that answer is a very obvious yes. Recently, I completed my Resident Evil journey by playing all the games, so going into RE9 was a refreshing experience, seeing as the last game I played and finished was Code Veronica, and Resident Evil 9 is a game that I'd say has the best of both worlds. It's a pure survival horror game that is truly terrifying, and dare I say way scarier than anything the franchise has given us, and it also has fantastic action gameplay as well. Now in this video, I want to talk about the game from my experience and essentially give a non-spoiler mini review. As for where it lands in my overall ranking of the entire series, it's an easy top 5 for me. Now I'm not going to do a full ranking here, but I played the originals and the remakes, and after finishing RE9, I can confidently say it earns that spot. Now let's get into the story. Obviously I'm keeping the story part of this video 100% spoiler free because you deserve to witness the story for yourself. But man, did Capcom really cook with the story. After coming straight off Code Veronica, which by the way has a great story, albeit very outdated in terms of gameplay, the first thing I noticed was how much more grounded yet cinematic this game felt. The writing is way more direct, and it actually feels very impactful in what's actually at stake here. The game is quite short, I'll admit. I think the average playthrough is around 8 to 11 hours. However, I finished it in just under 8 on the standard difficulty, and I would like to think I was taking my sweet ass time. And I also did find myself a bit lost at a certain point in the story, and even with that, I still finished it in under 8 hours. Granted, I do play on keyboard and mouse, which makes video games like 10 times easier. This game follows the story of Grace Ashcroft and, of course, the man himself, Leon S. Kennedy. What I loved about the plot is how it doesn't feel like another isolated incident in some, random corner of the world. This game's story feels like a massive final act celebration of everything that, in my opinion, Resident Evil has built since its very first game. One of my favorite parts of the story, and I think most of you will feel the same, is the callbacks. I'm a sucker for lore, and Resident Evil 9 is packed with it. I'm talking about, proper deep cut references to the Umbrella era. This game has mentions of the BSAA's downfall, and actual physical callbacks to locations and characters that made me audibly gasp. If you played the OG games, especially the games with a focus on Raccoon City, there are moments here that feel like a giant thank you letter to the fans. And it's not really a case of cheap fan service or pure nostalgia selling the game, as Capcom were able to write this story by having an impactful plot from start to finish. I also really appreciate how they handle the two protagonists. Grace has this fresh, vulnerable perspective of somebody who is scientifically brilliant, mind you, but physically out of her depth, while Leon brings that complete opposite side. I saw somebody tweet out saying Grace is trapped in a building with zombies. Meanwhile, the zombies are trapped in a building with Leon, and that couldn't have been any more accurate. Seeing how their paths cross and how both of them react to the locations was fascinating. I liked how in the story of RE9 it was more than a simple generic case of, shooting the zombies. As this story, there is a real mystery angle to the origins of the new strain, and also how it ties back to the older viruses that we know and love, or hate. The pacing is also, I'd say, very spot on. Often in these games, the story can be a bit of a drag towards the middle, but RE9 kept me hooked non-stop. And that's fantastic because it's a short game. So you would hope so, right? Every time I thought I knew where the plot was going, the game would suddenly do a 180 and completely change my perspective. I'll say this, if you're somebody who cares about the lore and the general timeline of the franchise, then you are going to be very happy. It answers questions I've had since I played those older games recently, but it also leaves enough of a mystery to keep the community theorizing for a long time. I mean, there is some insane puzzle right now that people are still trying to solve on Twitter that's apparently very tricky. So yeah, in terms of the story for RE9, this story for me is probably the most cohesive story this franchise has had in a very long time. Moving on to the dual protagonist system, because to be fair, this is the heart of why the game works so well. It's basically 2 games in one, and the contrast between both protagonists is quite insane. I mean, let's talk about Grace first. Her sections are pure unfiltered survival horror. If you thought the baby in RE8 was traumatizing, and trust me I did. Oh my god, what the fuck? Just wait until you meet the 10-foot monster hag. She is without a doubt the scariest thing this franchise has ever created. Every time I heard her coming through the halls of the Rose Hill facility, my heart was absolutely racing. And it's not just her either. Grace has to, essentially move around other massive threats like the chef, who isn't as scary but still intimidating. But you can just take him out stealthily, which is what I did. Oh, and there's another giant baby similar to the one in RE8 that's also just creepy as hell. Now, the thing about Grace's gameplay is that it's a complete 180 from what you'd expect from a modern action game. Killing is not the goal of Grace's character, escaping is. Every single bullet you have for Grace is literally sacred. I mean, Leon gives her his weapon and it has 1 bullet in it. That's how scarce the ammo is for Grace. And to be honest, most of the time you're better off just running and hiding. I kept thinking to myself during these parts, if I had Leon right here, right now, this would be a totally different game. If Leon was in those hallways, he would probably just parry the hag and move on. But with Grace, you feel that genuine sense of dread. Then you would swap to Leon, and the game just opens up. It's like the leash is taken off. Leon has an absurd amount of weapon variety. You've got your standard pistols and shotguns, the heavy-hitting Requiem, snipers and machine guns. My personal favorite was the semi-auto sniper. That thing is absolutely overpowered and made you feel unstoppable, especially after being bullied during Grace's segments. What's really cool is the new kill tracking system. The game actually rewards you for being aggressive as Leon. It tracks your kills and gives you a specific currency that you can spend to upgrade your weapons or buy new gear. It turns the game into this satisfying loop of, see an enemy, kill that enemy and get stronger. And that right there makes the power dynamic between the two protagonists feel so distinct. I mean, with Grace, for example, you're a survivor just trying to see tomorrow. Whereas with Leon, you're the one the monsters should be afraid of. Balancing those two styles is what makes RE9 feel so fresh, and it keeps the 8 to 10 hour runtime from ever feeling repetitive. To really drive home how different Grace feels from Leon, I have to talk about her actual movement and realism, because this is where Capcom really went all in on the realism. First off, Grace isn't a trained super soldier, she's a scientist, and the game never lets you forget that. She has this blood sampling gameplay where you're literally trying to collect data and samples from the environment and the creatures while you're being hunted, and it fits into the crafting system too, because the more blood that you collect, the more that you can craft. And I think it's a very creative way to change up the crafting system. She also moves very different from a traditional Resident Evil protagonist. She is slow as hell, but it's not because the game is clunky or anything like that. It's genuinely because she is terrified, visibly terrified. When you're walking through a creepy corridor, her hands actually shake as she holds a flashlight or tries to aim. If a monster gets too close, her breathing gets heavy, and her movement becomes more erratic. It's such a complete 180 from Leon, who is basically a walking tank at this point. I do genuinely think Grace might be the most human character we've ever had in a Resident Evil game. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the badass nature of other characters in this franchise, but there is something so refreshing about playing as somebody who reacts the way a normal person would. It is such a bold move for Capcom to make such a protagonist this weak physically, but it makes the horror hit 10 times harder. Now, I have to talk about the locations and this upgraded RE engine because my god, this game is gorgeous. If you're a tech nerd or, somebody who just appreciates a good atmosphere in a video game, RE9 is a very, very good looking game. Since I just came off Code Veronica, which was released in 2000, 26 years ago, seeing the evolution of video games makes you appreciate just how far we've come. The standout is obviously the Rose Hill Chronic Care Center. This place is designed in the most Resident Evil way possible, and I mean that as a massive compliment. It's got that classic puzzle-heavy interconnected layout, where you're finding weird keys and backtracking to open that one door you saw half an hour ago. But unlike a game like Code Veronica, where backtracking meant running across an entire island and back just to use a fire extinguisher, RE9 feels so much more refined. The shortcuts you unlock feel rewarding, and the way the facility opens up as you solve the Rose Hill mystery shows how much Capcom have evolved in level design. It's detailed, it's perfectly sized, and the lighting in those cramped hallways is so well done. Even the variety of zombies. I think I read somewhere before the game came out that Resident Evil 9 has the best looking depiction of zombies, and I wholeheartedly agree. The amount of detail put into zombies is top tier, and nothing comes close. Maybe Dead Island 2, but that's a rogue shout from me. Just by looking at the zombies, you can tell what their previous job was, and who they were before they turned, whereas most games just depict zombies in the exact same way. Another beautiful location is Raccoon City, and again, I keep saying it, since I played the originals recently, seeing Raccoon City now after those older games, especially post-Nuke, was quite surreal. The way that Capcom depicted the aftermath is so accurate. The color palette is washed out, it's got, dusty and it's grey. I'd say it perfectly shows us a Dead City aesthetic. I mean, walking through the city and seeing the toppled buildings, even some creatures that are still there or have made the city their home works very well. There is a giant spider too, so if you have arachnophobia, then that's unfortunate. And I will say, RE9 gave me a bit of an RE6 feeling in some places, and I know that sounds crazy, but I don't mean that as an insult. This game feels like what RE6 was trying to be. Leon gets a couple of those big over-the-top moments where everything's exploding and you're just there along for the ride. And for a second you're like, wait, am I playing RE6 right now? But the difference is RE9 uses that stuff sparingly. Resident Evil 6 was built entirely around non-stop action, so you may say that's why it felt so tiring. Here, it's only once in a while, and because it's used in moderation, it actually works very well and feels fun instead of draining. And then eventually the RPD station is another beautiful highlight. It was so cool to stand in a room and match up what used to be there versus what's gone now. You can see the charred remains of desks or hallways that you remember from RE2 or RE3, and the RE engine renders the decay with so much detail that you can almost smell the ash. There's even the Welcome Leon sign that's somehow still there despite a literal nuke. The typewriter is still there somehow, but I guess that's just a great case of having those cool references back. Now, I have been praising this game a lot, but I've got to be honest too, it's not a perfect game. I mean, no game is ever perfect. If I had some criticisms, the first thing I would have to talk about is the barrier to entry. Despite what some reviewers or Capcom themselves might say, this game is not beginner friendly. If you are jumping into Resident Evil 9 as your first Resident Evil game, you're going to be lost, plain and simple. Because the game takes you back to these old iconic locations and brings back legacy characters, there is this huge expectation that you already know the lore. If you don't know why Raccoon City is a crater, or why Leon is as driven as he is, or who Spencer is, or what the T-Virus is, half the emotional weight of the story is just going to fly over your head. It's a game that rewards you for being educated on the past games, but it definitely does punish you if you have not done your homework. Coming off playing every game recently, I appreciate the depth, but I can see a newcomer just being so confused by why everything feels so strange. Then there are the puzzles. Now, I love the level design, but I know some of the hardcore fans are going to find the puzzle side of things a bit light compared to the classic games. In the older games, you'd be standing there for 10 minutes trying to decipher a cryptic poem, or maybe you move a statue into a very specific order to obtain something. In RE9, the puzzles are more about the navigation. It's literally just about finding the right item, figuring out the safest route to the facility, and then looping back once you've cleared a path. I'd say it's definitely more environmental problem solving than it is a brain teaser. For me, that worked because it kept the creepiness of the game quite high, especially with the hag chasing you as Grace. But I totally get why some people might be disappointed. If you're looking for that proper old school puzzle logic, then you might find this one to be a little more simplified. It is definitely evolved into something more fluid, but in doing that, I will admit it's lost a bit of that weird eccentric charm that puzzles used to be. It's not a deal breaker by any means for me personally, but it is something to keep in mind if that's your favorite part of the franchise. So to wrap everything up, is Resident Evil 9 Requiem worth your time? If you couldn't tell by now, the answer is a massive resounding yes. After marathoning the entire series right before RE9, I can say this feels like the peak of what modern survival horror should be. It's rare to see such a developer take a big risk by splitting the game down the middle like this. It's a best of both worlds situation that actually works very well. You've got the survival horror that is pure survival horror, and then you have the action with Leon. The RE engine is doing work here that I did not think was possible. I played on a 4080 Super at 1440p max settings, and it was simply consistent frames everywhere. For me, this is an easy top 5 Resident Evil game. If you're a fan of this franchise for years, this is the payoff that you've been waiting for. If you're a horror fan in general, then you need to play this. So yeah, I can't wait for the Code Veronica remake and RE10, and I hope those are good. I mean, Code Veronica definitely needs a remake. That game is so outdated in its gameplay design, the voice acting is awful, but the story is quite good. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I will see you in the next one.